What's up, you fucking weirdos? Welcome to where the weird ones are.
Yeah. Weird ones only, we talking that truth. Ghost in the attic, yeah, show me the proof. Aliens creeping, they light in the roof. Minds wide open, we shatter the booth. Conspiracies deep, we dig in the scars. Demons and angels and bodies on Mars. Cryptids be watching, they lurk in the dark. Mental on edge, but we glowing like stars. Welcome to the pod, no cap, it's a seance. Whispers in the static, spirits doing dance. Reptiles in suits, yeah, running the lands. MK Ultra made a puppet of your mans. Wendigo hunger, dogman strut, flat woods, eyes glow. Slice through the cut, Bigfoot tagging trees. Marking the trail, weird ones ride, no room for the frail. Talking about trauma, talking that soul. Peeling back layers, we dig in a hole. Sacred geometry, numbers align. Ancestors speak through the veil and the sign. Ayahuasca dreams, third eye lit. Shadow self lurking, we making it spit. No mainstream lies. This the dirt where the weird ones rise from the blood and the hurt. Weird ones only, we talking that truth. Ghosts in the attic, yeah, show me the proof. Aliens creeping, they light in the roof. Minds wide open, we shatter the booth. Conspiracies deep, we dig in the scars. Demons and angels and bodies on Mars. Cryptids be watching, they lurk in the dark. Mental on edge, but we glowing like stars. Voices in the woods got chills on the neck. Black-eyed kids at the door, now we check. CIA tapped in, fluoride drip. Project Bluebeam, watch that script. Talking about grief, talking about fear. Talking about why them voices appear. Healing the mind while breaking the chain. Spiritual warfare deep in the brain. We don't run from the strange, we live in the strange. Tattoo the truth and the scars and the pain. Stay weird, the mantra we own in the name. Reality bends, so we bend to the same. From the attic to the swamp, we tracking the freak. Where the veil get thin and the silence speak. We ain't your norm, we off that grid. Weird as the wave, yo, this where we live.
Hey, this is Rochelle Stratton, and you are listening to Kevin with Where the Weird Ones Are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
What's up, you fucking weirdos? Welcome to another episode of Where the Weird Ones Are. My name is Kevin, but you probably already knew that, and if you didn't, now you do. Today's episode is with Alexander Skarsgård. No, I'm just kidding. Alexander Petakov. He does a lot of work with Small Town Monsters, so you may be familiar with him. He has his own YouTube channel where he goes on adventures, which is pretty dope. I like watching that shit too. But Alex is a really good dude. I really enjoy talking to him. His perspective is engaging or interesting. Um, he's very knowledgeable in the field of not only Bigfoot, but just the outdoors in general. And I really enjoy talking to him. It's always a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun to talk to him, to see him in person. Got the chance to do that a few times now. And maybe we can continue to work together in the near future. But um, anywho, so he talks a lot about the Ape Canyon, which I had no idea about. I did see like the trailer and stuff for Small Town Monsters and found it interesting. And I wasn't really expecting to go that route in this conversation, but I'm so glad we did because I had no freaking clue about Ape Canyon. Um so yeah, we talk a lot about that and his thoughts and theories and all that good stuff. So quick shout out to the sponsor, Flavors of the Forest, raw garlic dust. Go get yourself some. It's really good. I enjoy it, and I think you will do. I will too. Bleh. To me, in my opinion, it's way better than anything at the store. Everything that I've tried, garlic powder wise, from the stores, well, this far by surpasses it. So, anyways, so you can get that at flavorsforest.com. You can also follow them on Instagram at flavorsforest. So go check them out. Also, if you are experiencing any kind of mental distress, I know that this time of year tends to happen to a lot of us between the stress and all that, the anxiety, not being enough, not doing enough. Your presence is good enough, I promise you that. So please, here in the United States, dial 988. That is the suicide prevention hotline. I believe they expanded from suicide to just mental distress in general. So if you need somebody to talk to or resources, definitely hit them up. They are equipped to help you. And also, if you are somebody who just wants to help somebody who's going through something, they can also give you resources in order to help them as well. So utilize them. They're there for a reason. We don't need anybody going out by their own hand or by anybody's hand, really. So yeah, I hope you guys are holding up well. Don't underestimate the hole that your presence will leave behind. So yeah. Anyways, if you need somebody to talk to, you can hit me up. Also, if you're interested on being on the show, you can hit me up at wheretheweirdones@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram where_the_weirdones_are. Send me a message. Maybe we can link up and either just talk or we can record an episode, whatever you want to do. Definitely reach out and please like, follow, share, subscribe, leave a rating and review. That helps out a lot. Obviously not necessary. I'm not going to hold any of you to that, to be honest with you. So, but yeah, if your catcher doesn't allow you to leave a rating and review, please consider doing so on the website where the weird ones are podcast.com. There you can also get hot sauce, coffee, supplements, short stories, and a whole bunch of merch. There's tons of designs in there. So check it out if you're interested. If you're not interested, then you won't check it out, and that's totally fine. But I really hope you guys enjoy this episode with Alex. He's a phenomenal dude. I can't talk highly enough about him. I really enjoy picking his brain and listening to him talk. So let's get in. Where the weird ones go production. Hey, welcome to another episode. So happy to have you here today. I have my good buddy and fellow New Englander, Aleks Petakov. He works with Small Town Monsters. I'm sure you're well aware of who he is anyways, at this point. But for the people that might not be, Alex, if you don't mind, give them the good people a little bit of a background on you.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me on, man. Good to be back. So my name is Aleks Petakov. I'm a filmmaker and kind of like a cryptozoology researcher, Bigfoot investigator. As you mentioned, I do a lot of stuff with small town monsters. So I do a series called Bigfoot Beyond the Trail, Strange Places, the Appalachian Bigfoot Files. I just did a special presentation. I don't know, that's kind of a tongue twister. A special documentary on Ape Canyon. So I do a lot of stuff with STM, and I've worked with them for quite a while. So that's kind of my main gig and kind of what people might know me for. So that's the short pitch, I guess.
Perfect. So I've been seeing all the I don't know, what do you want to call it, the marketing or the ads or whatever for Ape Canyon, and I have it queued in my YouTube and stuff, but I was wondering where exactly that was. Is that like Arizona-ish area?
Ape Canyon is on Mount St. Helens in Washington State. So
Oh shit.
in the Cascade Range, yeah. So
Okay.
So as of recording the podcast, my film called The Journey to Ape Canyon just came out actually on Thanksgiving Day, so that would have been last week. Yeah. And we actually had another film called The Siege of Ape Canyon, which came out previously as well. So They're both about Ape Canyon, but they both kind of are different. The Siege is more of a film about the history of the incident and the researchers involved in investigating the case from 100 years ago. So you got Mark Marcel, some other folks, and mine is more of like a physical journey of like, we're going to this cabin site. So long story short, for folks that aren't familiar, the Ape Canyon incident is kind of like one of the classic Bigfoot, Sasquatch stories of old. So the story goes in 1924 on Mount St. Helens, there was a group of 5 prospectors who were working a mine they created looking for gold. And they'd been working this mine for a couple of years, and they started having kind of strange things happening. And they built they actually used to tent camp and then descend down into this canyon, work the mine. And from the records that we know of, they actually claimed a good amount of gold. It's never indicated exactly how much, but apparently they did pretty well for themselves. So they didn't say like, oh, they got $10,000 worth of gold. It was just said apparently that it did pretty well. But they used to tent camp. But then in 1924, they built a log cabin. I guess they blasted the shelf out of the side of this canyon and built a cabin there. And then that's how they would descend down to the mine, and they would stay there for periods of time. And they started having all this strange stuff happening. They would hear whistles, stuff in the very steep canyon area called Ape Canyon. I'll explain that in a minute. But they would hear these whistles. They would hear these thumping noises. They would find these large footprints kind of all up in the areas in the woods around there. And it culminated in a series of events in July of 1924 where they actually saw what they alleged were these like 7 to 8 foot tall, hair covered ape men looking creatures that, were looking at them through the trees. And at one point, some of the miners started shooting at these things. A couple of days later, they had another incident. They shot one of these things, and it either, got away or fell over and died in the canyon. And then, they decided after that point to abandon the operation. But as the day was getting late, they couldn't get off the mountain in time before the sun went down, so they had to stay the night. And that night is when a battle of sorts, if you want to call it that, ensued, where they alleged that the cabin was being pummeled with rocks. There was things hitting the sides. There was creatures jumping on top of the cabin. It displaced some like chinking that was present between the logs, where they could peek out and see like 7 to 8 of these things in the moonlight running around. And one stuck its hand in, tried to grab an axe. Another one tried to dig in through the bottom, and they started shooting at these things. And it's like a crazy story, right? So this incident happened. They were shooting, and I guess the attack ended when first daylight came about. So the sun starts coming up, and that's when these creatures disappeared. And the miners were very frightened, and they packed up their belongings, and they just basically got out of there. And they had about a 7-mile hike back to their vehicle, going up more towards the mountain, and then back towards their car or their truck, which was towards Spirit Lake, which is on the other side of Mount St. Helens. And they originally said they weren't going to tell anyone about it because people would think they're crazy. But I guess the first person they ran into was a park ranger, or not a park ranger, excuse me. At the time, that area was part of the Columbia National Forest. It's now part of the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, but this was 100 years ago. And they ran into a forest ranger and his wife, and I guess they told the story, and this ranger described them as being the most frightened I've ever seen a group of men, and they were all like clutching their rifles tightly. And then they left. They go back to the town of Kelso, Washington, and this is like mid-July at this point. And they go to a saloon, and the story, they tell the story, and then it kind of spreads like wildfire. Local media starts talking about it. You've got the AP Newswire that then transmits the story across the country, and it becomes this huge, I have dozens of clips of like newspaper clippings from the time. It's like miners fight 8 foot tall ape men. Like all these miners tell crazy yarn of battle with apes. Gorillas found on Mount St. Helens. Like there's all these insane newspaper headlines from that time period, which is really cool. And it culminated in the Great Ape Hunt of 1924, where a lot of the locals armed up and went up to the mountain to try and find these apes. 2 of the miners, Fred Beck and Leroy Smith, I believe, were the only 2 miners that ever went back to the cabin site, and they went with 2 police detectives and a reporter, and they took some photos of them in front of the cabin with holding some of the rocks that they alleged were thrown at them, and then one with their rifles, kind of reenacting what happened. That was, after that they never went back to mine at the site anymore. And it became part of the legend. In the 1950s, there was a group of Boy Scouts who called themselves the Mount St. Helens Apes, likely taking their name from this famous story. That canyon, by the way, was named Ape Canyon subsequently after this story. And this is obviously like before Sasquatch or Bigfoot is a cultural thing. This was even before the term Sasquatch, which was a few years later in Washington, or excuse me, in neighboring British Columbia, Canada. That's when that story came about. So they just called it apes, Mount St. Helens Apes, the Ape Canyon. The place got its name. There's a 2-mile lava tube down there that this Boy Scout group called the Mount St. Helens Apes discovered in the 50s, and they call that Ape Cave. It's like a lava tube, which is like it's like a 2-mile long cave you can actually hike through. I haven't been to it, but I'd like to go next time I'm in the area. And then to complicate matters, so basically the cabin, people had lost track of where the cabin location was, and then in 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted. Mount St. Helens was actually a volcano, and it erupted, and it was like the most destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history, and it like destroyed most of the mountain, like a large portion of Mount St. Helens. I guess volcano. I keep calling it a mountain, but it's interchangeable, I guess, at this point. But it is technically a volcano. So most of the forests there were destroyed, but the side where Ape Canyon is, it was damaged and impacted, especially with that much debris and stuff blowing out. I mean, this stuff blew into multiple states, in the parts of Canada, like the western U.S. There was ash all over the place in the 80s after this happened. And so that obviously complicates the Ape Canyon story, because then the cabin is already being eroding and then like gets covered in debris, and who knows what else happened. So that part, luckily though, that part of the mountain actually survived the explosion. Like there wasn't, some of the trees originally hundreds of years old are still there, left over. That like one part wasn't impacted like the other sides of the mountain. And so then for a while, the Ape Canyon story was considered to be a total myth. Like there was never any reality to the story. The miners were made up. It was just a tall tale, right? There was no reality. It's just like a crazy story. And until basically a guy named Mark Marcel came along. He's a really interesting character, really great guy out in Washington. He's a surveyor, and he was really interested in the Ape Canyon story, and he actually went and investigated it. He's been investigating now for 20 years, basically 20 years. And he rediscovered the cabin site in 2013. What was left of it, they found artifacts, spoons, parts of saw blades, a shell casing from, what they believe was one of the rifles at the time. And then a full decade later, in 2023, the great grandsons of one of the miners, Leroy Smith, who's a real person, they rediscovered the mine, which was, just kind of under a very treacherous path to get down there. Not really a path. It's like a drop off to get to the mine, but it was there. So they rediscovered the mine site. So we know the mine was there. The cabin was there. There's historical records. Mark has the records. So it's not like a myth. Like there was a mine, there was a cabin, the people were real. Question is, did the story happen or not? That's the part that we obviously don't know. There's a lot of claims that it was just it was a prank they pulled. But the interesting thing is they worked that mine for over 2 years, and this incident happened, in 1924. And after this, they didn't go back to the mine. But I've heard the story. They just made it up so they could keep people out of their gold mine. Well, like they left the place afterwards. Like they didn't go back at all. So why would they? You'd think that story would, you make it up at the beginning to keep people out of your area. Right. And it had the opposite effect, because it created this great ape hunt where people started going up to the mountain and then looking for it. So I think that kind of explanation is null and void. They also blamed a local YMCA camp that was like 6 miles away. They said that these guys hiked down there and were throwing rocks at the miners and playing a prank on them. And I can say, and I'll get to this, but like in my film, I go physically to the cabin site. It's like an insane place to get to. Like the idea that a group of kids at night were traversing this terrain with no lights on and getting shot at and throwing rocks at guys is just laughable to me. I think it's just insane. It's an insane explanation. Yeah. Makes no sense. Yeah. Having seen the site, if you see the film, you'll understand why. So that's kind of the long story short of the Ape Canyon incident. And so my film covers a little bit of the history there, like what more specifics about kind of what happened, in what order. and then the journey there. Like we went up there last summer on the 100th anniversary of the incident. Like we were there 100 years on the dot from when this stuff happened, and we spent a few nights up there, and we went down to the site and went into the mine. We saw what was left of the cabin site. And we heard from Mark and his research partner, Brad, about, the stuff they had found. Like Brad had found a shell casing there that he believed belongs to either like a 30-30 Winchester, which would have been a lever action rifle, which would have been accurate for the time. And in the photo of the two miners taken by the reporters after the incident, one of them has like a Winchester lever action rifle, and the other one has, I think it's a 32 something. I'm not sure. I forget the specifics, but it's this rifle that you load it with a clip, and it has a 5-round clip, and you load it in, and it like has a switch that goes forward, but it's a similar cartridge. It's not a common cartridge anymore. Like a 30-30, I have like a 30-30 lever gun. Like you can pick up 30-30 anywhere, whereas this caliber is very kind of like antiquated. It's not one that's common anymore. So they're not sure, because it's kind of deteriorated, which one it is. Like you can't read the back or anything. So it tells you that somebody shot a gun there at some point, probably was around the time of the mine. Now, does that say that does that prove that the story was real? Obviously not 100%. Like we can't be sure, but the mine was real. The people were real. Cabin was there. And like slowly that hillside is eroded. But I was standing there with one of the trees that would have been there for the original cabin site, like this giant Douglas fir tree. And I'm like thinking, man, if only this tree could tell its stories. Like, tell me, was it real? Were the apes real, right? And there's been a lot of other, obviously the Bigfoot subject grew a lot more in like the 50s and 60s into, modern day. But there's been plenty of encounters there around Mount St. Helens, in that area, near Ape Canyon, south of Ape Canyon, ever since. I mean, people like Cliff Barrickman, in the film, I interviewed him, and he talked about they have like a footprint cast at his museum in Oregon, the North American Bigfoot Center. He has a cast somebody gave him from like 2023, which was captured right near, or found right near Ape Canyon. So still a very desolate and tough area to get to. And it's a crazy story. And it's like one of those classic Bigfoot stories that's just, you've got a few of them, but like Ape Canyon is one of the coolest. So it was really cool to be able to go there on the 100th anniversary. And no one's ever really filmed at the cabin and the mine site before. So that was like super cool to be the person to be able to tell that story. Probably one of my favorite films I've worked on lately. And, we do a lot of different films and videos at Small Town Monsters. So this one has like stood out because of the significance to me, obviously. So yeah, that's kind of the journey to Ape Canyon.
Dude, I've never heard that story before in my entire life.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So this is amazing. I'm so happy that you told it in significant detail, because this whole time, like I remember hearing about St. Helens and being a volcano and erupting in the 80s. I remember that, but I've never heard this story. So, but it does explain to me the fact that it had erupted in the 80s, why it looks more deserty to me. And like some of the pictures and stuff that you posted about it, and I was like, oh, that must be Arizona, because like Ape Canyon, like that to me that didn't make any sense. Like I was like, if I might have had a better idea of, because to be honest with you, I had no idea where exactly St. Helens was, but I knew it wasn't in Arizona. But yeah, that explains why I thought it was in Arizona now, because that is completely like changes.
It's like a lunar landscape up there, man. I mean, and what's crazy is in the film, I was able to find like government pictures from the 80s where they took a picture from this one ridge.
Oh, wow.
Like, well, I think, and like they took one before the explosion, and you see this beautiful, like, and the mountain lost over 1,000 feet of elevation because like the whole top part blew off, so like it got significantly smaller, and you can see kind of like the crater hole in it to this day. But the one picture was taken before the eruption, and it's got the mountain right there, and you can see this beautiful like lush forest. We'd probably go in there and be like, oh, this is so squatchy, like, the perfect kind of like those Pacific Northwest forests. And the next picture was taken roughly from the same place, but like a year after the eruption. Dude, it looks like the surface of the moon. Like there's nothing alive. Everything's destroyed. And I did like a little, I overlaid the picture of the before, and then like just the transition straight into the after, as it's the same spot. I was like, this is unbelievable. So entire ecosystem destroyed. So what's crazy is like, again, Ape Canyon was like the one area that was spared total destruction. The north side where kind of most of the debris was going. I mean, there were lahar flows, which are kind of where like volcanic ash and water flows down off of, and you'll see like it looks like giant like empty stream kind of things. And I have footage of it in the video because you can see them from Ape Canyon or like in that area. But when you're hiking up to Ape Canyon, you're going through these beautiful old growth forests, and then where the cabin site is, there's the huge old growths right there, and that's the one area that got completely spared. So if it had ended up like the north side, like we wouldn't be talking right now about this story because it would have been lost forever. I mean, there was no way anything would have survived in the path, and luckily that side, that like southeast side of the mountain where Ape Canyon is, was spared. So that's amazing, just on itself. So, but like when we were walking to go get water, we had to go through some of the areas that were a lot more devastated, and it kind of like strikes you. You're like in the trees because you're hiking over 4 miles to get from like the Ape Canyon trailhead, and you're just going through the trees, and then you kind of get to an area, and then you're suddenly like there's no trees, and it looks like you're on the moon. You're like, dude, this is really weird. It's like a weird difference compared to a few hundred yards behind you heading down the mountain. It's wooded. It looks like a beautiful, Pacific Northwest forest, totally different. So we got a little taste of that. But again, thankfully, the cabin site, the mine in that area were, I'm sure they were covered with a lot of debris and stuff, but they didn't get like just obliterated like many other parts of St. Helens did. So I can see why you think it was like somewhere random or like in Arizona or somewhere more dry, because it's a wild looking landscape,
Yeah. Yeah, I saw you guys. You guys also had to descend by rope too, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we weren't like strapped in rappelling, but it's pretty steep and gnarly terrain. So we definitely were using gloves and rope to kind of help guide our way in certain areas because it's treacherous. I mean, honestly, like I've done a lot of crazy stuff and I've been to a lot of crazy locations. This is easily one of the craziest because I mean, there's like drop offs, and knowing these guys built a cabin there is just insane. And then mining it like on the side of a drop off that basically goes hundreds of feet down to the bottom of the canyon. Like you could drop a pickaxe down there or a tool and like you're never seeing that thing again. God forbid you fall down there. And the terrain maybe it's changed a little bit in 100 years, but it hasn't changed that much. Again, this area, like I said, was not obliterated by the volcano. So like I guess what they did was I think I mentioned this, they blasted a shelf out with dynamite to build the cabin, like to build this flat spot. And that has since eroded because now the cabin site is basically like a hill just going down with dirt, and you've got like trees and stuff. And that's where some of the objects have been found in the past by Mark, the spoons and the tools and the nails and that kind of stuff. So yeah, you can see there's been erosion over time, and probably as the years go on, another 100 years, it'll probably be even more erosion there. Who knows? Maybe the mine will get fully eroded. It's hard to say, right?
Right.
With how rough of the winters are up there, and obviously the St. Helens explosion didn't help. But yeah, it was a gnarly place to get into. Like you got death around every corner. We had a medical incident while we were there too, so that kind of like created a whole nother challenge where a guy who was filming with us, I wasn't part of this group because we had to go down in 2 groups, but some of the other guys were filming for the Siege of Ape Canyon film. And one of them, Tyler, he's got like a national park ranger law enforcement background, and he was cutting like a branch out of the way and like accidentally sliced an artery. Like the knife slipped and it sliced his artery and had like blood spewing. Yeah,
Oh
it was
my
in the
goodness.
canyon, and luckily he has some training, so he was able to get people put a tourniquet on him, and I guess the tourniquet broke and they had to use like part of like a belt and pants and stuff, and they got it stabilized and everything, and he had to then hike back up the mountain with the help of some other guys, but getting up.
Wow.
And we had to get him off the mountain, get him to the hospital. He got like I think 8 or 9 stitches. Like that's not the play for that kind of thing to happen. It's like insane. I covered in the video because from my perspective, I wasn't part of the group that was in the cabin site when this happened, but we were hearing it through text messages because we had like limited service up there, believe it or not, because there's the government has these volcanic monitoring stations at like different intervals around the mountain, and they have cell service. So like if you go to one edge of the area, you get like 2 bars of service, and then you go past some rocks and it disappears because the signal doesn't penetrate through into the canyon. So we were like hearing from the guys down there like, oh, we called search and rescue, like we had an incident, and the first thing you're thinking is like somebody fell down the canyon and is dead. Like, I'm not trying to be dramatic here. That's the first thing I thought. That's the first thing me and Shane Corson, the Olympic Project, he was there, and a bunch of us. We had another guy who had a law enforcement background there as well. And we were all like, we were bracing to go down and like do a recovery mission, you know?
Yeah.
Luckily, that was not the case. Not to downplay what happened. And it, you know, Tyler being the guy, again, who had like law enforcement background, last person I would have expected this happens to. But it goes to show that like anything can happen, and especially in a dangerous place like that, it makes it that much more dangerous. So that was a crazy incident, and yeah, that was
Absolutely.
And we joked around like, you know, he's gonna have this cool scar, and he can say he got it on the 2024 Battle of Ape Canyon. You know, 100 years from the anniversary of the original battle. Kind of a cool story. So we made our own little chapter of Ape Canyon history 100 years from the original event, which felt really, really cool. But again, you know, not to downplay the situation, it was a serious situation, but luckily ended up a lot better than it could have been. But yeah, getting down there, treacherous. I do not recommend it. Don't do it. You very likely can die. Please don't try it. We had a big group of us, and you know, people who were very experienced doing this kind of stuff, and Mark, who rediscovered the site. So that's why we were able to do it. But it was something, man. It was something else. Like, just again, being connected to that story, and you know, learning more about it, and the history there, because it's like a story, you know, you hear about for so many years, and then it's like a reality. Like, there is this place was real. I've stood in the mine.
Yeah.
I've been like one of 10 people that's been in the mine since it was rediscovered. Totally insane. So yeah, that's pretty much that with Ape Canyon, I guess.
Oh man, that's wild. Like I said, man, I never heard the story before. I mean, if I have, I just don't remember it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, I talked to a lot of people about Bigfoot and stuff like that, so I'm surprised that like this isn't logged into my brain if I had heard it, but
Well,
I appreciate you telling the story, and
yeah, of
I'm
course.
definitely excited to watch your video now. Like,
Yeah, no,
I'm
I
so
appreciate
much
that.
more excited about it.
You know, it's like what I think it might be too is it's one of those stories that's just like it's a lot of people, you know, talk about it, and it's, you know, if you
Yeah.
search Ape Canyon on YouTube, you'll get like all these creepypasta stories with the AI images where they just like narrate and tell the
AI.
story with incorrect facts and don't get any of the story right. About like, you know, it's just become one of those stories that like it's all over the place. So, you know,
Yeah.
because you've got these classic tier of Bigfoot stories from the past that people, you know, over time they get kind of like, I don't want to say perverted, and like they get changed, you know, the telephone game and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's cool to kind of go back to the roots of it, and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's one of those stories people just hear Ape Canyon. Even a lot of people that don't know about Bigfoot, they just hear Ape Canyon and they don't really know what that entails. They're like, oh, there was some kind of thing that happened there, and that's like the extent of what they know about it. So yeah.
Yeah. That's cool though. I want to do stuff like that someday, or at least once. At least once. Um, make like, we want to know what I really want to do is I want to film an expedition going out to the Nahanni Valley, the Valley of the Headless Men or whatever it's called, I think. Um, there's speculation that that story is untrue about the McLeod brothers.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been, at least Charlie is a real person. I know that. I think they proved that Charlie was real, which is the
Yeah.
surviving brother.
There's supposed to
So
be, yeah, because I've looked into that too. You know, I can't really say a whole lot about it, I guess, but I'm trying to be super cryptic here, but there is, you know, from what I've heard from my buddy in Canada, that there are people that like are related to the miner or the guys who are the prospectors there too. So
yeah,
that they were real people. So again, it's like one of those things like with Ape Canyon or some of these other stories, Nahanni, where like these stories of these people, they get so mythologized that people forget that they were actually real. Like there was before Mark Marcel, literally people were saying, yeah, the miners were made up. Like this never happened. There was never a mine. And like I literally was there with two of the great grandsons of Leroy Smith. Like, it was he was a real person. Like he has a bloodline that is still around today. And those guys, you know, were with us. You'll see them in the video. climbing around with us. So, it's like, I don't know. I think some of these stories get told so often that people just kind of assume they're completely made up. Even if, again, like whether it's Nahanni or Ape Canyon or Port Chatham, the Bauman story, like there may be elements that we don't know if they're real or not. Like, was there an ape battle? Were these men beheaded by something in Nahanni? The Port Chatham story, did it really happen in the way it happened? Maybe not, but like there was a real place, there were real things that went on. Again, we probably will never know the truth, like of what actually happened, but people like Mark Marcel, they come in and they do 20 years of research and prove so much of the story that, that like he's obsessively into researching that case. And again, that, full credit goes to Mark. He's the only reason I was able to even go there and do this stuff, because he's again rediscovered this place. So full credit to people like Mark, who like became his kind of passion. And there's other cases like that out there, but those are the people really doing the hard work and proving some of these events aren't just fiction, but there's actually some fact behind them. Again, you cannot believe that the Ape Canyon attack happened. Totally fine. I'm right there with you. I personally believe something happened, given all the pieces of evidence, having been to the location myself and seeing it now and being like, yeah, I mean, these guys are crazy to build a cabin here. Like, why would they make up a story about ape men? I mean, it's possible, right? But you can't contest that there wasn't like reality behind some of these stories. So that's kind of where I'm at with Ape Canyon or Nahanni. And, I was just reading a book on Nahanni recently, and Port Chatham, all these other kind of classic stories.
Yeah. I find it in this whole stuff, all of this, all these stories, the locations, super interesting, and I would love to at least be able to visit half of them. But I do find it interesting out of that story is the fact that the sun comes up and then they're like, oh, well, it's time for us to go. We're not going to fight you guys anymore. Let's get out of here. That's the most interesting part of the story, because I'm like, why would they? They're fighting you, but why would they leave in the? It makes me think of the movie Congo with the.
I love that movie. It's a great movie.
Yeah, me too. With the albino apes, albino gorillas, or whatever.
Most underrated movie of the 90s, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I loved that movie when I was a kid. I loved a lot of movies as a kid, but
that movie got unfairly treated, in the days of Jurassic Park and everything. And it's such a classic adventure movie, and the soundtrack is great. But anyway, I didn't mean to derail.
No, it's good. It's good. It just like made me think of that, because they were always hiding in the darkness, and they wouldn't really come out in the sun until like the end. But yeah, I wonder like you said, if the trees could tell us the stories, that would be oh man, imagine like if that like if that story was absolutely true and that tree was just like, dude, yeah, I saw that shit 100 years ago. Like, dude, oh my goodness.
I hugged that tree at the site, and I'm like, I know it was there when this happened. So it's seen the cabin, it saw the guys there years on end. Just that one night, but what I find interesting is like, as on the Bigfoot investigation side of things is like the story, it predates a lot of those, Bigfoot stories that we hear nowadays, but it kind of like fits a lot of the reports that you hear, right? Where people are talking about getting stuff thrown at them, rocks and the banging on the side of the cabin. And what's interesting too is there was not like these things just like violent out of, just attacking these guys, but they built this cabin in a very unusual place. Like people probably, I mean, I don't know why people would ever be there, right? Like it's an insane location to be. I would never go there just for fun. So, somebody builds a cabin there, and they've already been working this mine for a couple of years, and they actually build a cabin. I think a lot of times in some of these remote places, that's where some of this activity starts, is when people are building things or making a presence in a place that humans normally aren't. Maybe you're encroaching in territory, or you become a curiosity. Like I think that's what happened with my friend up in Alaska, on the Kenai Peninsula, Area A, as we call it. I've done a lot of videos on that place, and I've been there 3 times, and this super remote area where you got to take a boat to get to, and they build a cabin and they start having stuff happen. Stuff's curious, throwing rocks at them, whatever. maybe it's an aggressive thing, like trying to push you out. But with the Ape Canyon story, these guys shot allegedly, according to the story, that they told, they were the first ones that shot at these things. So they kind of like provoked. I don't want to say they provoked an attack like this, but maybe they took shots at these things multiple times before this alleged night battle happened. So, who fired the first shot? Han or Greedo, like, it's like Han Solo or, but clearly it was the miners, I think, that fired the first shot. So maybe that's what instigated the event. I don't know. But again, a lot of the elements you hear with the Ape Canyon story, I've heard in other alleged stories of people having like remote areas that have been, like the Snell Grove Lake stuff up in Canada. Again, my friend Scott up in Alaska and his kind of case and everything. So I don't know. That obviously, again, doesn't prove that it was a real incident. But it is interesting that, this was well before Bigfoot was popular, Sasquatch was known, and these guys told this story in a way that mirrors a lot of what modern encounters, and like in that time since, there's been stuff like that that's been reported. So I don't know. Did they all take it from the Ape Canyon story, or is there like an organic, genuine phenomena going on that expresses itself in different ways, in different parts of the country and in North America in general, I guess?
Yeah, aliens. No, I'm just kidding. No,
But maybe,
but yeah, I find it interesting though. A lot of the stories of when they are violent is when it's like something you're doing something to the earth or the wildlife or something. So they're
yeah,
mining the earth, and this happens. And then I think, I mean, Ron Moorhead's story with the samurai sounds, the Sierra sounds. I apologize. Um, they sounded like samurais.
right. The samurai chatter. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And they were out there, they were hunting, I
It's like
think,
a
if I
hunting camp,
remember
I think.
correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then they got surrounded and they had rocks being thrown and stuff, and then they caught that audio and stuff like that. So,
yep. Snell Grove Lake, Canada.
Ron's
Yeah,
told me stories of Alaska, people, they were doing something they were excavating or something and they got attacked or something like that. And he went up to investigate and he's like, once you stop, this will stop. And then they stopped excavation and they never had an incident again. So
yeah. I
it's
mean,
interesting.
there's something too. Like a lot of the reports I've heard here in New England and other places too, like when areas of the forest are being logged. And
Yeah.
I can't remember who told me this, but somebody was saying, go to like areas that are just being logged, and like people talk about having stuff happen, stuff getting thrown to the tractors, and almost like there's this anger being expressed or frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to case that I know better than most, most of the other cases I'm just more familiar with this, but firsthand and whatnot is up in Alaska area A. They build this cabin. The first couple of years they start having a lot of stuff happen, and then it kind of slows down after that. It's almost like those first couple of years they were like trying to scare the people off, get them out of there, and it didn't work, so they kind of gave up. So maybe there is something to that. About people, like you said, kind of like extracting stuff from the earth, or like I think maybe just encroaching in territory, like going to
Yeah.
places where people normally aren't, and maybe you've got a group of these things that have never really encountered people very much, and they're like, oh, who are these jerks coming in and stepping on my turf and kind of thing. So could have something to do with it. I don't know. I mean, again, a lot of the stories seem to correspond to that.
Mm-hmm.
We can't prove that. I wish we could, because otherwise then this would be like a bona fide example of like, oh, this is what Sasquatch behavior is definitely like. But if we
Yeah.
look at the anecdotal evidence and kind of look at it, it points in a certain direction. And yeah, a lot of these people that are doing this kind of stuff, they're fishermen, they're hunters, they're prospectors, they're just in these remote areas, hard to get to because they're trying to get a resource, and then they build some kind of infrastructure, or they're in an area and then they have stuff happen. And usually none of them are looking for this. They're not like Bigfoot researchers doing this. Even like the Sierra Sounds, from what I understand, this stuff was going on before they went up. Like this was an ongoing thing. So like you have a lot of these cases you can point to, and the stories are eerily similar in the purported behavior, which to me kind of leads me to believe that that's like indicative of a behavior that a species has. Like, bears behave in certain ways, moose behave in certain ways, humans behave in certain ways, in really crazy ways. We do a lot of, I guess, unpredictable stuff compared to other creatures we inhabit the earth with. But a lot of this stuff that you get the same kind of things with the Sasquatch stuff. People hear the whistling, they hear the whoops, the wood knocks, the rock throws. That's what the miners were basically reporting before the Ape Canyon incident, that they would hear these whistles, and they'd hear a reply whistle, they'd hear this thumping, they'd find footprints. Up in Alaska, my buddy's property there at Area A, they heard whistles, they heard whoops, they heard wood knocks, they got rocks thrown at them. They had all kinds of this stuff you hear in a lot of cases. So that's, I guess, what I'm going for, in a really convoluted way, is trying to say that that's the overlap. That, again, it's anecdotal evidence. There's recordings, there's alleged recordings we have of this kind of stuff, and it points to the profile of a behavioral trait. Not going to the example of apes, because we as humans, we are apes technically, right? We are very different from gorillas and chimps. Don't get me wrong. We are, hominids, upright, but we all still have similar behaviors, whether people want to admit it or not. Because one of the things that really people got really ticked off about in my film was I had Cliff Barrickman talking about how humans are apes, and people are going off about, no, humans are not apes. Sasquatch are definitely not apes. And technically, we are apes. Yes, people are saying, well, we're made in the image of God, right? Okay, you can still believe that, and so we're apes, just disgusting beings. They're still, if God made them, they're still creation of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you believe that or not. I'm just trying to argue that it's pretty. We're genetically very similar to apes, but we are so different. We're sitting in these houses, we're doing a podcast. What's a gorilla doing right now? Just foraging for leaves, right? It's very, very different. So Sasquatch is obviously something I'd say more akin to, an ape, in the sense that it primarily lives off the land. It doesn't need to live in an air conditioned or a heated home, and can barely survive in the wilderness. So it's clearly something that's living kind of off the land. But I don't know where I was going with this. It just kind of turned into a tangent. But I guess what I was trying to say was that these things have certain behaviors, and they kind of parallel other ape behaviors that we've observed. And with the rock throwing stuff, chimps throwing rocks at trees, the communication stuff, a lot of this, there's parallels of that in known apes. So and a lot of those behaviors do overlap with humans too. So make with that what you will, right? With the territorial stuff, with the a lot of the stuff that's reported. Yeah, it makes you wonder. And I think that's something that we should look at more, and try to draw those patterns, and be hey, let's look at 5 alleged case studies through North America where there's alleged Bigfoot activity, and let's check out the overlap. If you want to take the Ape Canyon story as your primary one, and then work on from there, do it. See what consistencies there are, and that sort of thing. And that's one of the things that I've noticed over the years researching and investigating, is the consistencies in the eyewitness behavior. They're all over the board. When talking about individual eyewitnesses, I've talked to people that are such diametrically opposite sides of the spectrum, very different lifestyles, the most conservative, hardcore, kind of right-leaning person, and then the most hardcore left-leaning hippie type, in the Pacific Northwest or wherever. These people probably don't agree on anything, but the weird thing is they both happen to be in a remote place and saw something that isn't supposed to exist, a upright ape-like, man-like, hair-covered creature, right? So, and neither of them were looking for Bigfoot, or believed in it. That's usually the case with a lot of my favorite eyewitness encounters. It's usually that's the consistency there. So, yeah, I think it's worth looking at the behavioral stuff, because either everyone is making up the same type of behavior with their encounters and reports, or there actually is something that's exhibiting this behavior, which I think is more of a realistic possibility. But obviously the debate is still open, and it's up for interpretation.
Yeah. So I want to tell you a story real quick. So I went on my first ever Bigfoot expedition, and I can't attest to as in Bigfoot behavior or anything, because I don't think I experienced anything that can go along with that. But I tell it as my first ever Bigfoot encounter. So we're out in the middle of the woods in the Smoky Mountains. We're in this holler. It's dark as hell, and I see a bunch of like glowing things. I'm pretty sure they're fireflies or lightning bugs, whichever one you
Oh yeah.
choose to describe them, and they're everywhere, everywhere. And we kind of like set up like somewhat of a bait kind of thing just to try and get a glimpse of it. So we had the um, thermal camera on where the bait was, and then all of a sudden there was a figure there, and three of us saw. Riley was one of them that saw it.
I think you
Um,
mentioned this. Yeah.
yeah, Harley Owens was the one holding the camera, and then he showed me, and I swear on everything that I love and hold dear in my heart is I saw something standing over by the tree near where this bait was, and I saw big, broad shoulders and a head. I don't know what else it could have been
Right.
because none of us were over there.
Right. And then
So
did you see it disappear, or did you just kind of like
I
didn't
just
see it?
like so he showed me, and then he continued looking at it for himself and holding it up to his eye, and then he's like, "Oh my God, there's two," and then we're like, "Let's try it, let's see if we can touch it," right? So we just kind of ran over there, and they were gone. There's no footprints or anything either where they were sitting. So I don't know like how it looked on the thermal, but when
Right.
they redid the thermal, there was a bunch of weird stuff, but they never saw the figures. I saw a figure on that
Hmm.
camera, but when they played it back, there was no figures. And Riley saw a figure, Harley saw a figure.
Oh,
So I
the
don't know.
footage was recording at the time?
Yeah, it was recording.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
that's very interesting. And then Riley had his got hit with infrasound right after that, probably about an hour or so later, where he was hearing sounds like it was like it was surrounding him. And I will say too, right before this happened, I was hearing screaming from in front of us, and then I'd hear it behind us, and then it would be in front of us, and then it'd be behind us, and I was like, oh boy, it sounded like we were being surrounded, essentially.
Hmm.
So
Interesting. Do you know what kind of thermal that was that you guys were using? If you
I
remember.
don't know. I would have to ask. I would have to ask Drewski or Juan, because I think it belongs to one of his operatives, Juan. I think
Hmm.
that's who owns it.
I'm just
Um,
curious because I use a lot of thermals and like I use a
yeah.
pulsar. I've got one. I think you can't really see it on the shelf behind me, but I've got a pulsar and an AGM, and the pulsars are crazy. And like if you got something there, like it'll definitely record. But thermals can be weird sometimes, man. Like there will be times like even the best thermals, like this pulsar Helion 2 is really high end stuff, but it'll still like it'll skip. There'll be times
Uh,
where like you're on something and like it'll skip and then it'll be like it'll freeze and it just does weird stuff. There's always issues with these with technology, unfortunately. But
yeah,
maybe
that's
you guys
true.
had like some kind of glitch or something, or
It's
I don't know. But that's definitely that's weird. The fact that three of you saw it, that's interesting. You know, it's not like
yeah.
if one of you saw, like, you know, one of you, maybe you, like, for example, hadn't ever used that thermal before. You might not know what to look for. And I see this a lot with folks that I'll let them try to use thermal for a little bit and they'll be like, oh, I see something. And it ends up being like a tree or something because a lot of times these will give off a certain glow. And so, like, I always tell
Hmm.
people, especially if they get a thermal, practice with it before you go out, like, on an expedition, right? So that's one thing is like, you know, let's say three people, you give it to one guy and he's like, oh, I see something. And then the other two, like, I don't see anything. Or, oh, it's a tree. But, you know, if three of you are seeing the same kind of thing, I mean, I can't, obviously, I wasn't there. I can't tell you what you
Right.
saw or what you didn't see. But I'd be like less inclined if it was just like just one of you saw it and the other two, like, were looking at the same area and didn't see anything, right?
Yeah.
So it's always better when you have more people to experience something because then you know, it's not just like in your head or something you're misinterpreting if it's three people having the same thing happen. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I
but
really wish that we had it was bleh, we were able to have the recording because I would love to show you right now. Like
right.
you probably would have been the first person I would have sent it to be honest with you, if we had it. But unfortunately. it didn't capture anything. And I know like a lot of animals make some like interesting noises where it almost sounds like not human. So those screams could have been like, I don't know, coyotes or something like that. I'm not saying that it was like Bigfoots and we were
Right,
being
right.
surrounded by them and stuff like that. Because I like you, I like to try and look at things more logically and try to like dispel what it could be
Right.
before I arrive to what I want it to be, I
Yeah,
guess.
no, I think that's a really good way of doing it in general. Like I try hard too to like when I have stuff happen, try to debunk it. Um, and it's weird. Like I had a recent experience in West Virginia where I was in this area that I was told to go to where there'd been some activity, and I did like a solo night kind of thing out there, and I just literally slept in my vehicle, and I'm just kind of standing around my vehicle filming at night. Like it's like this reservoir kind of thing, like a Army Corps of Engineer lake, and there's been like a lot of encounters in that area. It's a very rural area in general. And I started hearing this like screaming, and it just sounded like people just going, like doing this screaming. I got it recorded, and I was filming while it was happening, and I have it recorded on my recorder. And I'm kind of like, okay, this is kind of weird. I'm thinking like, and I'm sitting there the rest of the night. I'm like, it's got to be just people, right? Like it's probably some guy on a ridge, maybe living on the other side of the lake, and he's like screaming. I'm like, that's what I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know what it was, and I have the recordings, and I sent that to some folks, and they were like, yeah, it could be interesting. But later on that night, as I'm settling in to go to sleep, I hear like this perfect, just crisp knock because I had my window rolled down. And I'm like in the back of my RAV4. I had a little built like a little platform, so I'd sleep in the back instead of having to set up a tent. And I'm kind of settling in, and then I just sit with the window open and just listen. And I just heard this one like crisp, clear, shh, kind of knock, and I got really excited. I'm like, oh man, like maybe that was legit. And then I didn't hear anything for a while, and then I started drifting to sleep. And then on the recorder, I had a bunch of knocks and stuff that night. I can't say what it was, but I had a thermal camera on top of my vehicle pointed towards like where the lake was ending, and there was this like muddy area where the kind of water flowed into the lake. And there was just like tons of deer tracks, tons of bear tracks. Supposedly there had been a really good Bigfoot print found there some years ago in this location, and there was like some really good sightings right where I was. But that night on the recorder, I had like 14 videos of black bears crossing, like right outside my vehicle, like going around in the mud and leaving footprints. And I was like, that's kind of cool. But so again, my point in the story is like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what those screams were. It didn't sound coyote to me. It sounded human like. So obviously like I'd like that to be something interesting, but I can't say 100%. But I think it's important to always try to like debunk your stuff. And if you arrive at the conclusion of, like, I just don't know how to explain that. I don't think you're saying that's definitely a Sasquatch, right? Like you're just saying like, I've tried to explain it away as coyotes or this or that, and I'm just left with this mystery. I think that's a good way to, is it like I don't want to say responsible, but like that's a good practice, I think, in general to have is like, because if you didn't see what did it and you have no like definitive proof, obviously, it's going to be complicated. Can I just pause for 1 second?
That's right.
But
You're
anyway.
married now. The last time we talked, I don't think you were married yet.
Oh, yeah. I got married last October, a little over a year ago. So yeah.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. That's beautiful. I love that. I love love,
Yeah.
That's
It's good
awesome.
stuff. Good way to do it, especially nowadays with how crazy everything is in the world and how people are. I think it's good to kind of go down that path.
Absolutely. I agree. That's probably my next step with Allie. You met her at in Portland. She was pregnant
Cool.
at the time.
Oh, congrats. That's awesome.
Thanks. She's the baby's getting big, and my oldest son, he's 17, and he just got his license, and he drove the car that I got him out of my driveway yesterday, and it was the weirdest feeling because I
Oh my
got
gosh.
a child pretty much ready for just about ready for the world, and
Right.
then I come inside and there's this little baby sitting here still needing everything. And it
Yeah,
was
that's
like it's
totally
weird.
crazy difference, huh? What a difference like almost 20 years makes, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's wild. Um, but yeah, so the the when it comes to noises in the woods, man, it gets really crazy because there's so many things that make different noises, and I don't like me personally, I haven't heard all of them, at least not
Right.
in the wild. And the trip that I was just telling you in pre-roll that we went out to the White Mountains for my birthday, and my son and I were sitting out by the fire just by ourselves, and we're deep in the woods. There's a couple houses here and there, but we're up on this ridge, and everybody else is down by the street, down by the road. Um, and we're sitting there, and we hear something that sounded like a dying bird, maybe, and then right after, and I'm not gonna try and recreate the sound for you because it's like I don't know if I probably wouldn't even come out accurate, but right after it, it was three ooh woo, ooh woo, ooh woo, which could have been owl, but it sounded more like an ape to me. Like it sounded
Hmm.
like there was a monkey in the woods. I was like, and we both looked at each other and were like, "What was that?"
Yeah, look up screech owl sounds. I mean, you might be familiar with screech owls, but
Yeah.
um, they make some weird noises. I had one like the other day. I was in the woods and I heard like 30 feet from me go off, and it scared the crap out of me because I was like just getting dusk and I did not expect that. I was getting like a card from a trail camera, and all of a sudden it just went off, and I'm like, "You little son of a bitch," like like it just because it just catches you off guard. But yeah,
Yeah.
barn owls obviously. Yeah, I mean it's weird, man. There's a lot of sounds in the woods. Like here's a story I heard recently from a friend of mine, and I'm not gonna like out him or anything, but he he told me about this experience he had in Oregon where he was filming some stuff about these like mountain goats, and he said like they were in this area and they heard this like crazy like kind of like thumping sound, and he was just like, whoa man, what is that? Like there's like echoing through the mountains, and like we were talking about like things that people might think might be Bigfoot, and he was like, I guess the guys he was with told him, oh, that's the sound of mountain goats, the males smacking their horns together, when they do those battles.
Yep.
It's like the male dominance thing that they do. He's like, oh man, that's really crazy. He's like, if I was out here on my own and I heard that, I'd be like, dude, I heard like Knox or Bigfoot or something like that, because he's into this stuff. So
Yeah.
that was a really cool story. Like it stuck out and made me think about all of these things. Like you hear some of this stuff and you're like, what did I actually hear? Because obviously, like you said, I think you put it in a good way, or that's a great way to put it. Is you can't hear everything that's out there, right? Like you can know what most of the stuff sounds like, but animals can do a weird noise that like maybe has never been documented before. Like that is possible, I guess, right?
Hmm.
So it's hard to say. Now, what I like is like when multiple things happen, and this is something that some of my buddies that are more into like the audio side of things talk about when they do like long duration audio recorders and overnight audio and recording for months at a time in certain areas, and then like religiously studying that data. It's like what's interesting is when you get multiple things going on at once. So you have like percussives, knocks, and then you get like a whoop or a grunt or some other kind of noise. That's almost like because you can hear a knock. I mean, it could be like debris falling, right? It could be bear falling out of a tree. Like there's a lot of things that possibly could be.
Uh-huh.
I'm not discounting it could be Sasquatch too. Like I've heard some that I'm like, I don't know what else it could have been, but I can't prove it. But like you hear a good knock, and then there's like or there'd be like a whoop. Like that's what a lot of these guys look for is like the multiples, because then they can say you can put it in the pile of like, hey, it's more interesting than it maybe being just like random debris. Like because it's two types of, so you can argue like there is some sort of if there's a grunt or a vocal, there is maybe a biological creature that, or something like a source for that knock or that rock clack, or a tree breaks and all of a sudden you hear some like noises. There's like something that did that. And again, you can't say 100% that's Sasquatch, but there's a lot of people doing stuff with the audio now that's very interesting, and looking at the patterns again to see if like there's some consistencies there. And if it doesn't really fit like known behavior, like we talked about, obviously you can't hear everything in the woods, but we talk about the behavior and like these things, just creatures in general exhibiting certain behavioral traits no matter where you go. Or maybe there's like a regional thing, different species do things in different habitats, or maybe more adapted to. But if you look at maybe combining some of that data and saying like, okay, well, there's a consistency here with like people hearing knocks, whistles, whoops, and getting rocks thrown at them, right? Like that's for me is like, again, you're getting into more interesting territory, because you're already limiting what could be going on, because not many animals can throw rocks at you in the woods. Like very few in North America that can do that other than people. I guess a bird could potentially drop a rock near you, but I don't think that's like a very common thing that happens at all. Squirrels maybe throwing stuff out of trees, like smaller animals like that. But like I'm talking people who have like witnessed rocks this big flying past them, or landing in front of them by their campfire. Like there's plenty of cases like that. I talk to people who like physically have the rock they got thrown at them, and like so there's stuff like that again you enter a territory that's a little more interesting than just, oh, I heard like a whoop. Like, that could be interesting on its own, but you get multiple pieces. And that's why I always try to, like, my approach is kind of like when I'm out there, I have stuff happening, I'm hoping got audio rolling, got video, maybe thermal, and like if you have something happen, try to get multiple pieces of evidence and data out of that one incident. Don't just have it be like, oh, it was just like a crazy story, or I got video of it, or I got a thermal. Like if you can have multiple pieces, man, like, hey, I had this one event happen last week up on this mountain. I have audio of the whole incident. I found tracks. I did 3D scans of the tracks. I took photos. I'd made casts, and I have video of the incident. Like you have multiple pieces of data to work from the same event, and that helps like strengthen your claim as a researcher, an investigator, an experiencer, whatever. Like obviously a lot of people having these encounters, and we talked about this earlier. They're out there like hunting, fishing, mining. They're doing like, they're not interested, and that's when they have stuff happen. And they're not like there to collect evidence or do any of this kind of stuff. So a lot of times that's why they don't have anything to show for it, in my opinion. Or if they do, it's, like cell phone video of something screaming or walking away, you know what I mean? So there's very few people that are actually going out there with like a approach. Yes. Hello, Avi. Avi's being my cat. Avi is, he's having fun over there by the heater, getting set up in bed. So,
Nice.
Okay, Avi, we get it. You voiced your opinion. Anyway, where I was going with that was, just a lot of times these people are not like looking for Bigfoot or evidence or anything like that. So in reality, like how many people are there really at this moment right now that are seriously looking for good Bigfoot evidence, investigating and researching? Like there's not thousands, right? I mean, most people that are going out are like doing stuff on the weekends. I'm not a professional. Like I'm a filmmaker. I try to do like my, as objective as I can, like citizen science. Or if I, like that incident I had in West Virginia, what do I have? I have audio and video of it. You have my reaction on camera and then audio running on the vehicle. That's all I have. But like I can send that to somebody and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, tell me what you think. So, I mean, I don't know. How many people are actually doing that kind of stuff? Like again, we talk about the people with the really good stories. They're usually like some of my favorite Bigfoot stories, not looking for Bigfoot, just doing other stuff. And it's like a chance encounter. So I don't know. How do you square that away? Because obviously it's difficult. You go and looking, and a lot of times you don't have stuff happen. Or if you do have stuff happen, it's, we're not expecting it. Even when we were up in Alaska, one of the times when we're sitting around the campfire, and it's like 3 a.m. We've got thermals and cameras, and we had audio going, but we hear these really good knocks, and then all of a sudden what sounds like rocks being thrown, and you can hear them crashing along the beach and crashing into the water. And we're kind of like caught off guard because it's been hours of just nothing. And then like the breaks the silence, and you're kind of for a second, you're like, what's going on? oh man, and then you start scanning your thermals, and this stuff always seems to happen when you least expect it. Like I've never had a situation that I can think of where I was like, okay, something's gonna happen right in front of me right now. Like it does, it's like it's usually when you're not expecting it. It's like one time when I was with my brother here in New Hampshire, and we were in an area that has had a history of stuff going on. One of the best knocks I can say I've heard, and I don't know what exactly it was, but we get to this area on this power line, and I'm literally pulling the recorder out of my pocket and getting it fired up because we had hiked up this kind of power line cut into the woods and get to the top of the little ridge, and it kind of drops into the swamp, and the power line continues. I didn't have a thermal or anything at the time. This was like years ago, but I'm literally pulling my audio recorder out, and we both hear this like perfect metallic, like bang kind of sound right in like the power line cut in front of us, like on the opposite hill. And I looked at him like, dude, what'd you hear? He's like, I don't know, man. It just sounded like a really loud, like bang kind of noise. And I turned the audio recorder on, and it just stops. Like there's nothing. We don't hear anything else the rest of the night. And to me, it sounded almost weirdly metallic. And what's interesting is, the power line there, they have like the metal transformer poles, the really big ones. Every I don't know how many hundred of yards they put them apart. But like I took a rock and threw it at one of the ones, on a different time we were out there, and I threw it at him. Like, that sounds like what we heard. If I had a thermal, maybe I could have seen what was down there. Like, I don't know. I can't say obviously that was what it was, but like it was so funny because we had just gotten to the ridge where we were about to sit down, pulling the audio recorder out, bang. Nothing. We heard nothing else for like an hour after we sat there in complete silence. Nothing. I don't know. It's almost that's almost one of those like one and done kind of situation, or like, oh, these guys just got here. Is that what's going on? I don't know, but that was a cool one because my brother, who was at the time, he wasn't even really that into it. Like I kind of dragged him along. Let's go on a night hike because I'd had some stuff happen a couple days before that where I heard I thought I heard knocks. Well, let's just go out there, and he heard it too, and what do you do with that? If it would have been 10 seconds or 10 seconds later, I would have a recording of it, but I don't. So that was a weird. Anyway,
that is weird. There's a woman that I work with. She runs the scale house, and I was it was like early when I first started my job. I think it was like right after I started the podcast, actually. And she's talking to me about her and her husband have a camp up in northern Maine somewhere on a lake, or close to a lake, I should say. And she's just like, we're just having a normal conversation. We're literally not talking about any weird stuff. And she goes, yeah, the lake is really nice to fish in. And then Bigfoot starts throwing rocks at us, and we got to get out of there. And I was like, and I just like, what? What did you just say? And she goes, well, I don't know if it's Bigfoot, but something's throwing rocks into the lake while we're fishing at a certain time. She's like, it's always at a certain time we'll be fishing, and these rocks are coming into the lake out of nowhere, and we don't know where they're coming from.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That is like the behavioral stuff. Like you tell me that story, and I've heard stories just like that over the years. Plenty of them, right? Like that. That's no offense to Lady, that's like not a unique story at all. At least from my perspective, because I've heard so many like them.
Right.
What's exciting for me is that fits the pattern that we're talking about here with, like, for whatever reason, these things, I don't know, like I imagine, is there, if it is a Sasquatch, right? Obviously we have to say we don't know, but let's say there's like they're used to these people being there. It's probably a nice, beautiful remote lake in northern Maine, like Maine, New Hampshire, we've got tons of lakes, stories like this all over. And maybe they're just like, hey, every time the people are fishing, let's just throw rocks at them for fun. Like maybe is that entertainment? Is that a territorial thing? Because obviously, like, if they wanted to kill you, they probably could. I hear that from a lot of people saying, this thing was so huge, if it wanted to kill me, it could. I'm sure that like it would be capable of hitting the person with a rock. So it's not like I don't want to say it's not an inherently violent thing, but it's, what is why is it doing this? But again, it kind of just fits the pattern that we have established with other, anecdotal stories. But that is interesting that she just kind of brought that up on her own. And that's not, I've had stuff like that happen too, where people are just kind of, back to Alaska, my friend up there with the cabin, when he started having his stuff happen, this guy, ex-military, very serious professional guy, no interest in this at all. Thought it was a total joke before this. He's having this stuff happen. They're having all the stereotypical stuff, the whistle. It's when they were chainsawing, to clear land to build the cabin, the rocks. They witness a rock this size flying horizontally out of the woods into the ocean. The knocks, they hear the baseball bats, they hear the whistles, they hear this stuff, and this stuff goes like every trip they go out there, they had something happen, and it gets to the point where he's mentioning to he had to contract a bigger boat to get the materials out there to build the cabin. Right, his boat wasn't to get like a cargo kind of boat. And he's telling this stuff to the captain. He's like, man, like we've been having this weird stuff happen. And, this guy's a big game hunter too. So he knows all the wildlife out there in Alaska. I've seen the moose and the bear that the moose he's killed, humongous, like ice age mammal. And, talking to this captain, like, hey, we're having all this weird stuff happen. And the captain's kind of very nonchalantly like, oh yeah, you mean like Sasquatch? He's kind of like, no, man, I'm not joking. Like this is serious. I'm not trying to, why are you making fun of me? He's like, no, I'm not. I'm being serious. Like there is stories of this kind of stuff, the hairy man, Sasquatch, and then he related the story about Les Stroud's encounter on that same area in the Kenai Peninsula, where this particular boat captain was the same one that was contracted out by Les Stroud's production company to take Les when they dropped him off when he was filming Survivor Man, doing the Alaska season, or not Alaska season, the Alaska episode in like the earlier part of the show. And so it's like the stories are there, right? Like sometimes people just bring it up nonchalantly, and those are always my favorite ones where it's kind of just like a matter of fact, because they're just kind of like, yeah, Sasquatch stuff going on. Yeah, Bigfoot was throwing rocks at us, like there's a Bigfoot up that lives up on that hill, we've seen it, or it's just like stuff like that. You're like, what? Please tell me more. And I've had it happen a couple times with other things too, where like uninitiated. I was doing like a documentary on the Lake Champlain monster, and in a gas station, and I was like talking to some people, and some guy brought up like, yeah, I saw a champ over there in the water, and I was kind of like, whoa, I'm like working on something about it right now. It's kind of weird how stuff like that sometimes can happen, where it's just the story suddenly jumps out at you when you're not even really looking for it.
Yeah, it's just like ever since I started the podcast, I'll be in conversations with people I've never really talked to before, and just like
Right.
her, and they'll bring something up about Sasquatch or a cryptid or a ghost or something like that, and it'll be like completely random, and I'll be like, I have a podcast where I talk about this stuff, and they're like, oh really? And I'm like, yeah, man.
That's
But
awesome.
they never want to come on and tell their stories, which is totally fine. I'm
I get that.
like,
yeah.
but I like the whole point of the podcast was to have these conversations, so I
Right.
don't mind having the conversations without the content. That's not a big deal to me. But it's the weirdest thing is like immediately starting the podcast, just random conversations with people, and the stuff just now comes up all the time. So
That is so cool. I'd be curious if you were able to find out the name of the lake or the location, and you were to look at it compared to like either, BFR or Bigfoot Mapping Project, one of these sites that has like, a lot of sightings. How close are sightings, or is there a history at that particular lake? Because, I've heard of stories in northern Maine, lots of places, certain
Same.
lakes. I mean, it's and it, just it makes sense. Like these things, whatever they are, or whatever's going on, water seems to be a key. A lot of encounters happen in or around water, streams, creeks. So lakes are certainly no stranger to that kind of thing. One of the things too, like New England, the patterns with some of the stories that I've heard over the years is like during blueberry season, when the blueberries are coming in, like a lot of encounters are like, oh, I thought I was seeing a black bear, and then it stood up on two legs and looked like a hairy man and walked off into the woods. Like that, New Hampshire and Maine. I've got like one story I heard from New Hampshire, like guy talked about there was a family of these things that they would come up every time with the blueberries, and you'd see them in the corner of the field there. And it's in like in the patch, and you're kind of like, okay. And you hear this consistently time and time again. So resource chasing, hunting, I don't know, looking for a particular resource a certain time of year, following that. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's blueberry fields here in Kennebunk. And they stretch for quite some time. And I've been out there a few times, and I saw some like weird footprints, but people walk out there all the time, so I wasn't able to like
Hard to say.
deter um, it from being just a human. So
Something you got, I
um,
mean, as I'm sure you know, being a New England guy, and this is applicable to many other places. Like in the Pacific Northwest, they have dozen different types of blueberries, huckleberries, salmon
yep.
berries, like all these little other like tons of different ones. When you're going to pick this kind of stuff here in New England, like you're going blueberry picking in like up or up in the mountains when you're blueberry picking, like in a more wild area, what do you always got to worry about? You know, running into a bear, right? Like that's not totally uncommon. So a lot of times these encounters, people like they think they're seeing a bear because that makes sense. They've probably been warned, like make some noise when you're going out picking because you could run into a bear. Like you might not see it; it could be crouched down eating. So they
That's
see
where
something
we
that
get
looks
a
like a
lot
bear.
of bear activity is in those blueberry fields because it's
That's
not a farm blueberry field. It's like a wild
it's
blueberry
like a wild area.
fields.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so that makes total sense. So it's like that's people are already expecting to encounter like a creature, but they don't expect to encounter the creature. I mean, even the Winstead Wildman story in Connecticut from like the 1800s, the late
hmm
1800s. It's one of these other like kind of old school stories. They were blueberry picking and they saw this man-like creature get up and run off, and it was like a guy and he was with his dog. And that was like the original encounter that led to this posse of guys with guns and went searching for the wild man. So again, we're talking about like I don't want to be like a broken record here and continue to say the same thing about this like pattern recognition and the using that kind of data. But I think it's interesting. Like I really do because you hear like an
Same.
individual story, right? Like you heard the story about this lady telling you Bigfoot throwing rocks. Like that's cool. What's
hmm
really even cooler is when like you hear that, but you've heard that in so many other places or from other that similar kind of thing in other sources. So again, because you're then able to like create like a little profile and be like, all right, what do we know? These things apparently they like to throw it at a certain time, like you know, when out in these remote areas, like you know, maybe you start drawing some inferences from there. So that's where a lot of this kind of anecdotal data can really come in handy because otherwise it's just a story, right? Like you can't really do a whole lot with just a story about we get rocks thrown at us. But if you're able to then look at that, like, all right, like when I remember a couple years ago, I did a video about alleged Bigfoot audio stuff, and I had my buddy Scott over the Bigfoot mapping project. I'm like, because I kept hearing the claim that wood knocking, you know, the fact that's associated with Bigfoot is like it's suspicious or not suspicious. What's the word I'm looking for? Like it doesn't make sense, right?
hmm
It's just people are wishful thinking kind of thing, right? And I'm like, all right, so Scott, take all these sightings and give me like because he works with the data, and I'm like, give me Class A reports where somebody reported they saw a Sasquatch, and either before or after or during heard wood knocks, rock knocks, or anything along those lines, right? He's like, okay. Comes back to me a few days later. He's like, hey, here's like a list, and it was like 26 reports maybe from across North America where there was like a Bigfoot seen, and then they heard knocks either before or after. Like there was one encounter in the BFRO that was part of this list from like Colorado where these people said that they were hearing like knocks around their camp in like a wooded area and like a mountainous area, and they saw one of these things like in the glow of the campfire like moving between trees. And then I think they either saw another one or they had knocks afterwards. I could be conflating that with another report. The point is, again, there was two factors that went on. There was a visual sighting of a creature they believed was Sasquatch, and there was this knocking sound. And then, you know, I basically took that and there was even one report from, I think, the Ocala National Forest in Florida where a guy was hearing this like banging on a tree noise and like hiked towards it and actually saw this like gorilla like or ape like creature with like a stick hitting a tree, and then it ran off when it saw him. So there, you know, anecdotally, it's there. And I remember even one of the things that I found interesting was I heard the claim that, you know, oh, wood knocking was always like the BFRO, Matt Moneymaker, those guys invented that and associated with Bigfoot stuff in like the 90s or the 2000s, and then finding Bigfoot and whatever. I'm like, okay. And then I was reading a book, Grizzlies and White Guys by it's a collection of stories by this New Hulk First Nations guy up in Bella Coola, Canada, which is a remote area halfway up the British Columbia coast in the Great Bear Rainforest, like the most beautiful place. It's that, you know, temperate rainforest environment, Southeast Alaska, British Columbia, that contiguous habitat. And this guy was a bear hunter He was part of this new Hulk nation. They've lived there for tens of thousands of years. And the book was Grizzlies and White Guys, and it was a collection of his hunting stories from over the years. That was like, I guess his doctor had recorded him. They had like a traveling doctor. It's such a remote community. You have like people that have to travel out, And I've been to Bella Coola, and this book was the reason why. But he had 3 Sasquatch stories in the book, and they were like very matter of fact. Like the whole book is about him taking these like white guys and all these other people out on hunting trips to go hunt grizzly bears, right? Because that area has a lot of grizzly bears, and he's telling stories about Sasquatch. And it's like one time I was with a guy in Northern California, or he was from Northern California. He was with an American guy who hired him to be his grizzly hunting guide, and they're glassing this hill with binoculars, and they see a Sasquatch walking up the hill, and and the guy Clayton, he's like, oh, that's a books. That's like they have like a native term for this creatures, and they have different folklore for it there in that area. But like the American guy from Northern California is like, oh yeah, we have those things too. We call them Bigfoots down in our, because Northern California, you've got obviously the history with the Bigfoot name, Patterson-Gimlin. Whereas British Columbia, Canada, you've got more Sasquatch. And then specifically the natives there had their own interpretation. But my point in this story is when he's bringing up the chapter about like the Sasquatch encounters, and he lists 3 of them that he had over the many years of hunting. It's like one chapter within the book about other stories. So it wasn't a Bigfoot book. He talks about right at the start, he's like, one of the interesting things you hear is like how they're around is you'll hear up on one ridge, you'll hear like a loud bang sound. Like I forget the word he used, but it was like a whop, like some kind of like sound, the way it was written in the book. And then on the other side of the ridge, you'll hear another one. That's how they communicate back and forth. So I'm like, so this native guy who lives in an area, this book was like written in the 80s or the 90s. So like, and this guy has no connection to this before the internet. He's observing this and talking about it, telling his doctor about it, and then it's put into this chapter about Sasquatch in this book. So that clearly means that this has been reported for a long time previously. So yeah, I don't know. And then we go back to Ape Canyon. The guys were talking about hearing whistles. They'd hear one whistle and then another reply whistle, a thumping sound. Were they describing the same thing? I'd like to think so. Can I prove so? Not exactly, but it's fun to think about, and we have to start somewhere. So that's
absolutely.
That's the sound stuff, and with that relation to the Clayton Mack book, that's what inspired me actually to go to Bella Coola, and I did a documentary about that a few years ago. When we went up there, you look around, you're like, if these things exist, they're here. Like it just makes sense. Like one little tiny community, and there's just giant mountains everywhere. And actually, the Bella Coola community just recently had like crazy grizzly attack. 9 people were injured. Yeah, it was, and it's a small community, only like a few thousand people. It takes about, oh God, how much did it take us? It took us 19 hours from Vancouver to drive there.
Oh,
it was like you had to go through the coastal mountains and up through the plain. It was a crazy ride, but yeah, they had a recent bear attack there, and I guess 9 people were injured by a grizzly, like in the same incident. So it's a very like these people live with bears and moose and cougars and all this stuff, and they all a lot of the people that are talking about the sninnik, the books, these creatures, they see them, and they just it's part of like normal kind of everyday life to them. So they get rocks thrown at them, and they're like, they're displeased and stuff like that. So yeah, there you have it.
Goodness gracious. Man, I think my favorite Bigfoot stories are from natives. I'm part native. I don't look native, but I wish that I had the opportunity to learn a little bit more from my grandfather before he passed. But I mean, I still have family that live on the reservation and stuff like that here in Maine.
Okay.
I could always connect with, but I find it super interesting how they have they all have similar stories of a Sasquatch-like creature, and that ranges across to Europe, like indigenous tribes over in like New Zealand and Australia, and in South America and all that stuff. So I think it's super. Those are some of my favorite stories. But
yeah, I mean, no, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna go. I was just gonna ask you if you were. I was gonna move on to asking you about what your next project was coming up. So if you have anything to say on what I just said, then go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's something that I think about a lot, and it was very impactful. And I credit Lauren Coleman for this because I heard it at one of his cryptozoology conference events. I think it was in, I want to say 2017, or maybe no, it wasn't 2018. Oh, it could have been. Actually, I'm not sure. Whatever. He used to do it pretty semi regularly up there in Portland. Prior to COVID, there was, like, I remember I spoke at the one in 2018, but I went, I think,
Yeah.
2016 and 2017. And one of them I heard a talk, and this kind of relates to what we're talking about with the natives with the stories, right? So I've heard a lot of stories from different natives in parts of North America, and like the stories vary. They're very like similar, right? They talk about like, but you have stories of like the Sasquatch on the West Coast with the Salish tribes, and they describe the Zonaquah, a female Sasquatch, and it carries a basket on its back, and it takes kids and like throws them in there and eats them later on, right? That's part of the folklore. Like there's these kind of stories, but they all kind of revolve around this like hairy man-like creature, a lot of them. And then
Mm-hmm.
you talk about other cultures, and I think it really just comes down to our interpretation of them, right? Like, because different groups of natives had different cultures and different, like, obviously they're similar. Like, you go to Europe, most cultures, even if they're different, like they're more similar than they are, different. So, but they may have very radically different stories, but different tribes. Like we had Algonquin speaking tribes, like here in New Hampshire, it was mostly the Abenaki, the Wabanaki, right? And they were Algonquin, whereas you had over in New York, it was like the Iroquois and like the Mohawk, and they were, from what I understand, non-Algonquin. They all had similar stories about like things that were mysterious, right? So back to the why I'm telling this story is there was this professor named Dr. Anna Nakaris. She's like a primatologist, something along those lines, anthropologist. She's actually been in a couple of Bigfoot programs on the History Channel over the years, but she was speaking at Lauren Coleman's conference, and she was giving a presentation about her research into like primates, and she talked about these little creatures called slow lorises, which are these like tiny little nocturnal primates with these giant looking eyes. Like look up a picture of a slow loris. They're crazy looking. Super cool. I think they actually have like a venomous bite too. Because they have something in their saliva. They may be one of the only primates that has like a bite. It's either that or the tarsier I'm thinking of, but they're both very similar. Like little nocturnal, like little monkey looking things. They're tiny, like literally this big. Super tiny. And she told a story about how when she was studying them in Indonesia, she would go and into like these remote villages where you had different groups of people that, maybe you go one village over or one valley over, and they speak like a slightly different dialect, or same language, but different beliefs and stuff. And yeah, exactly. Look how cute that little guy is, right? Like
That is
they're
very cute.
very weird looking, but she's talking about what she found really interesting was, and I think she was relating this to like native stories about Bigfoot, Sasquatch lore, and other stories from all over the world. She said you'd go to like 4 different villages in this part of Indonesia, in these remote areas, and these people are all experiencing these slow lorises, and they all had such different interpretations. Like you go to one village, and they'd say, and I'm just paraphrasing here because I don't remember the exact quote, but I've told this story a lot over the years because it was so impactful. You'd go to one village, and they'd be like, "Oh, if you run into a slow loris, it means you're going to have really good luck. That's great for you. Like you're going to be blessed." Then you go a valley over to another village, and they're like, if you see a slow loris, it's a demon, and you will have very bad luck, or you will be cursed. And then you go over to a third village, and they're like, if you run into a slow loris, you have to kill it right away. And go over to the fourth village, and they have some version that's in between, villages 1 and 2, where it's like, oh, if you see one, it's an omen of some kind. It's going to be a bringer of good news or whatever. So it's like really interesting because what's the common denominator here, right? They're all seeing the same creature, this small little primate, and they're all groups of people, but they're just interpreting it in totally different ways, but they're looking at the same thing. And that's the way I kind of tend to look at a lot of like human stories about things that we don't understand, is we're just explaining it in different ways, but we could be observing the same thing. So that's why you have, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to like act like I know anything here. I'm just sharing my experiences off the cuff here. But you talk to like, I've talked to natives in like Northern California and Hoopa, and or actually the Yurok tribe in like the Redwoods, and they're like, yeah, the Sasquatch is like a forest guardian kind of thing, or the Bigfoot, right? Like the Oma. And then you'll go to like areas in British Columbia, and they talk about, yeah, it's like a cannibal, and it eats kids and puts them in a basket and throws them in there. But they're like talking about the similar sort of thing, but they're just interpreting it differently. So and I will always credit Dr. Anna Nakaris for that speech because it was really impactful. And obviously, like I said, Lauren, and I think that just goes to the overall like behavioral thing. Like we as humans, that's our behavior is our traits is that we're describing, we talk about things we don't understand and we just try to explain it away, and they may be vastly different. I think that's where religions are obviously different ways to try to explain the great cosmic questions that we don't understand without getting really philosophical here. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to like Sasquatch stuff too. Like people may have very different. It doesn't mean anyone's like wrong or right. It's an observed phenomena, right? Because most people, Sasquatch is something we're observing, trying to explain it away. So that, and I think that extends into the modern day. Like I hear, like we get comments on YouTube all the time. Right? I get people messaging me like, "Oh, I think Bigfoot's like a fallen angel Nephilim. I think Bigfoot's a Gigantopithecus. Or I think Bigfoot goes into portals. I think it's aliens." Like there's so many different theories. Maybe are we dealing with the same thing here? And there's just all these different interpretations. Probably, right? Like who's really right and wrong here? I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm opinionated in a certain way. Other people are. So yeah, I don't know until we have something more solid to work with. I mean, even if Bigfoot was captured tomorrow, right? Like if there was a Bigfoot body or something found and they proved that it's some kind of hominid species, I think the debate would rage even harder. Because like nobody trusts anybody government officials are saying anymore. So it's going to be like, oh, it's a psyop, right? It's like with the alien invasion stuff and the UFOs and the government, like can't believe anything they say. And Bob Lazar, Luis Elizondo, all these guys, like there's all this stuff. So even if Bigfoot was proven tomorrow, I think we're still, like people are like, oh, the mystery's going to be over. You're going to be out of a job. Like you're not going to be able to look for Bigfoot anymore. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's when it just starts. That's when it really, and you're going to get a lot. And what'll be interesting too, and I think is more people, like if, hypothetically Bigfoot was proven tomorrow, you'd have way more people willing to get into the subject and research, and people who maybe beforehand wouldn't have gotten into it that bring certain skills. Like, let's say we've got, I'm just going to like hypothetical number here. We've got 1,000 people actively looking for Bigfoot in North America right now. If Bigfoot was proven, maybe you'll get 10,000 people suddenly join in the fold. So that's going to be, maybe a good way to learn new things. I don't know. I think it would be interesting, and but the debate would probably still continue. People would still be like, yeah, I told you they were Nephilim and the government's talking about them now. Like,
Yeah. Do you think that if you were to capture Bigfoot on film, that guy that has a problem with you saying "dude" too much, do you think he would watch that video?
No, he's probably he probably left after the 100th dude, man. He's probably long gone,
I saw you post that, and I was like, "It's not. Everybody's gonna have a problem with something when
I thought it was a
they're
joke
consuming free." I'm
It
sure.
read like that. And then I responded to it because I was like, you can't be serious. And then the response I got back seemed very serious. And then I'm just like, oh wow, okay. I mean, maybe it's a joke somebody played on me. I don't know, but I thought it was hilarious, and I wanted to share it because it was, we'll get like some nasty messages and like people saying you don't know anything, and it's like, all right, whatever. This one was genuinely like entertaining, so I'm like, that's why I don't usually share that kind of stuff, but I shared this post about this guy complaining about me saying "dude" too much, where I'm like, I don't even think I say it that much, like invoke that kind of a reaction, but I guess everyone's got their own taste, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh man. All right, Alex. So, what do you have in the works coming up, and where can people find you if they're interested in chatting your ear off about Bigfoot?
Yeah. So, what do I have coming up? Like we were talking about earlier, just finished up the Ape Canyon stuff. So if you're interested in what we talked about the first half, go check that out. One of my like favorite videos lately, and I do a lot, but that was like the significance of the story really stuck out. But I have a few more videos coming up, rounding out this end of this year now in 2025 about Alaska. I was up there back in August and September. Area A, so the area we were talking about earlier, my friend who has the cabin up there, we spent a week out there, and I've got like at least two videos about that coming out. And then some more Washington stuff. I've got a few more documentaries coming like into early next year, 2026, and then just plenty more coming after that. So if you want to find out about any of that stuff, you can watch a lot of it in Small Town Monsters. But my website, I post all like my individual projects, which is petakovmedia.com. That's PETAKOV media.com. And I got like my Facebook, and I'm trying to get better about posting like project updates, because I got to a point on social media where I wasn't posting anything other than like just stuff for fun. Now I'm trying to post about like when I have new stuff coming out. But Instagram, Facebook, it's all linked on the website, and I have like a list of all the different projects, so you can check that out on there. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Again, Small Town Monsters, where most of the stuff will be like on YouTube, and sometimes you might see it on other streaming sites like Tubi and Alien Nation, Roku. I know there's a lot. I mean, I'm one person at Small Town Monsters. I do certain series and documentaries, but we have so many other creators as well who do different documentaries. So there's like a ton of stuff going on at any given time. So yeah, if you're interested in any of the stuff I specifically was talking about, my website would be probably the best place to have it like consolidated, because you can go on the YouTube channel and be like, oh, there's like 5 videos that have come out since Ape Canyon a month ago, and it's like maybe confusing to keep track of it. But
Yeah.
I recommend it all. But obviously, if you had to choose, you should probably choose, checking out my Ape Canyon film. But anyway, no,
Yeah.
just
I'm
joking.
gonna watch it for sure. And like you said, there's so many other content creators for Small Town Monsters, and I've been blessed enough to be able to talk to a lot of them, and to consume some of their stuff that they're doing, and it's a lot of everything that I have watched has been not only entertaining but informative of like what their specific, like the area especially. Like
Right.
you guys, like all of you, do extensive research of the place you're going, and I
Yeah,
think
we do a
that's
lot of
awesome.
that like geographical focus. And yeah, at the end of the day, we're just an independent production company.
Yep.
We try our best. We're not like some giant corporate network. There's literally like less than 10 of us. And we do have people that come in on the side and do projects, and like people we work with every once in a while, people like Hellbent
Hmm.
Holler, my buddy Jason Hewlett up in Canada, and some others. But we're like pretty small team. We do a lot of stuff, but we really try our best, and we try to just keep it real with the topics. And in my opinion, some of the documentaries we've done are some of the most, I don't want to say honest, but like just kind of down to earth about Bigfoot. And I'm not knocking anybody else. I think there's like, I've got a bunch of friends that do documentaries on this topic, and I think they do an awesome job. I'm just saying, like, we have a lot, and like we've accumulated a lot over the years, I should say, just with the amount that we've done. So, and there's other topics, we haven't done just Bigfoot. Like one of my favorite documentaries I ever did. Maybe we'll talk about that some other time. UFO related, about this abandoned radar base up in northern Vermont connected to the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. That's like non-Bigfoot stuff, but a lot of the YouTube stuff is Bigfoot focused. But we do have other documentaries, and there's endless amounts of stuff. Honestly, it's hard to keep track of, even for me at times, like what's going on. Like, but that's a good problem to have, I guess.
It is a good problem to have. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on and chatting. It's been a while. I'd love to chat with you more often. Maybe do some check-ins with you or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
Um, so, dude, the fact is, time is our greatest commodity, and I know you're such a busy person. Um, and I just want to tell you that I absolutely appreciate the fact that you chose to come and spend almost 2 hours with me now, just chatting about some of our favorite things.
No, my pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on, and letting me talk about my theories. And like I think about a lot of this stuff, and I'm try to like get ways to explain it with like the
Hmm.
pattern stuff and everything. And a lot of times you don't like talk about this stuff for a while with like other Bigfoot people or people that are interested in the same thing. So I appreciate you having me on here. And anytime, man, happy to talk. And I had a good time, and I remember from last time too. So that's why I chose to come on here. And yeah.
Thanks, man. Thanks. And for the listeners, if you don't mind, if you haven't checked out any of Alex's work, I highly recommend you do so. Also, if you don't mind, like, follow, share, subscribe, leave a rating and review. That is some of the free ways to help the show grow, and it's super easy. It takes a couple seconds. But if you decide not to do that, that's totally fine. I'm still going to be here having these chats anywho. Other than that, if your podcatcher doesn't allow you to leave a rating and review, you can also do so on the website where the weird ones are podcast.com. And that is where you can get some merch, like the shirt behind me. There's a ton of designs. Oh, and this hoodie too. I'm wearing the hoodie. And you can also get hot sauce, coffee, supplements, and consume some of my short stories that I've written up there. Other than that, I think you guys know the drill by now. Question everything and stay weird.
In the quiet of the night, when the world feels far, there's a voice through the static, like a falling star. It calls the misfits, the dreamers, the ones who see the shadows in the corners, the truth we barely believe. From the pine tree woods to the desert skies, they talk of ghosts and aliens with wonder in their eyes, not afraid to ask the questions that others won't dare, 'cause the world gets strange when you stop and stare. Come gather around where the weird ones are, by the fireside glow or a midnight car, where the stories run deep and the secrets fly like owls in the dark or stars in the sky. If you've ever felt lost, like you don't belong, you found your place, you found your song, right here where the weird ones are. They'll talk of cryptids, time slips, and deja vu, of spirits that linger, and what might be true. But more than the monsters, it's the people you'll find who dare to be open with curious minds. It's not about fear, it's the thrill of the ride, to question the world with wonder as guide. So pull up a chair, let your freak flag fly, we're the seekers of truth beneath the sky. Yeah, come gather around where the weird ones are, on the moonlit thoughts and cosmic scars, where the veil feels thin and the questions burn, and we chase the strange at every turn. You're not alone, not in the dark, you're with a tribe. You found the spark right here where the weird ones are. For the ones who wonder, for the ones who know, welcome home.